All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, they're going to have a conversation here pertaining to Mr. Kemba Walker and whether or not he's a better fit for the Boston Celtics than Kyrie Irving was. Obviously, the answer thus far is yes. And in my view, it truly exemplifies why sometimes the person that you want is not always the best person for you. Sometimes in life, you seek after that woman, you are able to establish a relationship with her, and things just don't work out for whatever reason. Maybe her personality does not match with yours. Maybe she does not respect you to the degree that you need to be respected. Maybe you are not mature enough to be with that woman yet. She goes her way, and then another woman comes along, and you're able to work it out with her because you're a better person and she's a better person for you. And it's very similar to what we're seeing with the Boston Celtics right now. Kemba Walker is not quite the player that Kyrie Irving is, but it's damn close. And his personality more than makes up for any talent disparity that he might have between himself and Kyrie. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Kemba Walker, there he is in his Christmas red looking icy. He's not playing around. Do you guys...
Kemba Walker, Soundview's finest.
Fine institution he went to college? Oh, the University of Connecticut. UConn is in the building, in the six.
UConn's
He's ready to go.
every day, Molly.
No question. 21-9, taking on a Boston team that is second in the East after the Bucks. Since the arrival of Kemba, Boston has been trending in the right direction. Credit his leadership in addition to the production as well.
Kemba's almost like one of those... He's almost like one of those emotional support animals. You know, people who've been through traumatic time periods in their life, whether they were at war or maybe they were a police officer. They've been witness to a lot of very trying situations, and they just need something to help them calm down and maintain their mental and emotional stability. So they'll have a dog that is given to them, or maybe they'll purchase a dog that'll make them feel better. Kemba has almost had that effect on the Boston Celtics. They were so traumatized by Kyrie and whatever psychological issues he was going through last year. They're just happy to have someone who they can approach and who they feel like is going to be receptive to some of the things that they want to talk about with him, and who's just a quote-unquote regular person. Once again, in my view, Kyrie Irving's problem is that he was gifted in the wrong sport. He truly needs to be in an individual sport, not a team sport, because he clearly is an introvert. And then when you combine that with some of the family issues that he was having last year, it's not a surprise some of the things that transpired in that Celtics locker room.
Yes, now, Richard Jefferson. He's calling the game out there in Toronto. Richard, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, I like this. I love the tux, the velvet, just for the holiday.
Cat look like he's going to a senior prom.
Yes, yes, yes. How you feel? How do I look? I feel like I look good. I'm sorry.
Richard,
I know
you're looking
not everybody can pull this off.
You look like you always feel like you look good.
Smooth right now. I can't front.
All right, guys, let's get it. Stephen A., I want to start with you here. Has Kemba made the Celtics better than Kyrie did?
Yes, he has, because his teammates are more comfortable. What Kemba has done is basically he's putting up the same numbers as Kyrie, but he's making his teammates feel more involved. They actually believe that they have the opportunity to score the basketball in clutch moments, even though Kemba really wants to take most of the shots in the fourth quarter if the game is close. He empowers Jason Tatum and he empowers Jaylen Brown. And that was one of the criticisms that I've had of Kyrie. With all the superpowers that he has out there on the court, the greatest superpower is the ability to empower others. And Kyrie still does not seem to understand that.
Concede because it's something that Max has been saying a long time. I have to concede yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes. I'm finally got to that conclusion. But it's not just because of what I'm seeing from Kemba with the Celtics. It's because of what I've seen from Kawhi in Brooklyn. The guy hasn't been Kyrie. I'm sorry, Kyrie. He hasn't been there. He's been out for a lengthy period of time. And we all know the noise that was emanating out of Brooklyn prior to his going down. And so because of that, when you consider what we're seeing from Boston right now, it's undeniable that you have to give credit where credit is due. First of all, when you think about Kemba, he's a tad bit shy of Kyrie Irving in terms of skill set. But he's the quintessential replacement, the perfect successor to Kyrie.
I agree with that. Not only because their offensive skill set and their physical abilities are close enough to approximate one another, but once again, the mental mind state that Kemba Walker is in is far more stable for the environment that he's in, that being a team sport. You need your leader, you need your point guard to always be focused on the task at hand and to always put his teammates above himself. Kyrie's not quite ready to do that because he truly is a frustrated shooting guard. He's a frustrated 6'2" Kobe Bryant.
What he brings to the table on the court in terms of his ball handling skills, his shot making ability, his scoring ability overall, and his miniature size. All those things he brings to the equation, relatively similar to Kyrie. But what clearly appears to be the case in Boston is that you have an abundance of people around him ecstatic to be playing with him. There doesn't appear to be any personal demons, any drama, or anything like that.
Jaylen Brown could not stand Kyrie by the end. I mean, it was very, very obvious.
That would inhibit his ability to perform or compromise the kind of relationship he could have with his teammates. That clearly was something that was going on in Boston last year because Kyrie admitted the losing of a grandparent, if I remember correctly, something along those lines. The bottom line is that kind of compromised him. There were other things like I brought up the Gordon Hayward being inserted in the starting lineup prematurely, stuff like that. I still stand by that, but there's no way around the fact this team looks better and happier with KEMBA.
Well, the reason why Stephen A. Smith still stands by his notion that one of the main aspects or one of the main components of what caused the fragmenting of the Celtics locker room is Gordon Hayward is because he was getting that information from those players, the Jason Tatums, the Jaylen Browns. They were frustrated that Gordon Hayward clearly was not ready, but he was still taking the time from them. And then you compound that with the fact that Kyrie Irving was going through whatever psychological issues he was going through, and that made their season last year a cesspool.
It's a team game. I mean, look, you said it. If you're looking for an approximation of Kyrie Irving in terms of what you do on the court, you can't do better than Kemba Walker. It's almost like if you're looking for Michael Jordan, there's Kobe Bryant. It's like almost the same thing, but one is a little better than the other. Kyrie is better than Kemba. His talent is pitched a little higher. His skills are a little bit better. But Kemba's a fantastic player. But you would think...
And Kemba's also lit up Kyrie Irving a few times. Let's not forget that.
Swap those two out just based on what you do on the floor or what you're capable of doing, you would get a little worse with Kemba. But I thought it was predictable that they would get better. Because whatever you want to say about Coach putting Hayward in before he was ready and Jaylen Brown or Tatum feeling any kind of whatever, I mean, the big thing to me is who's running the show, what effect does that have on his teammates? And with Kyrie, I saw a whole, and by the way, this even goes to the previous season. When Kyrie was hurt, they functioned better as a unit than when Kyrie was healthy. So what happened to the other players? All of a sudden, Tatum, who looked like an emerging superstar, stalled out. All of a sudden, Jaylen Brown really didn't develop. Gordon Hayward, okay, he had a bad season. Look at them all.
Let me say this about Jason Tatum, because I was hard on him last season. I thought that he was overrated. I thought that the media was overhyping him. And to a degree, I still think that they were, because they were speaking about Jason Tatum as if he was going to average 30 points per game last year based on what he did in the 2018 playoffs. And all he did in the 2018 playoffs was average about 17 points per game. He wasn't a superstar during those playoffs. So I had no idea why they were trying to prognosticate such high possible numbers or stats for Jason Tatum the next season, other than the fact that they were hoping to cause some dissension in the locker room between Kyrie and Jason Tatum over who the alpha was going to be. As it ended up, they did not need to try to cause a media distraction because there were going to be so many natural distractions. But before I forget, once again, just getting back to Jason Tatum, he's having an outstanding season this year. He's much better offensively, and he's one of the best players in the NBA defensively, if you check his defensive metrics.
Every single forward I just mentioned took a step forward, and obviously that's partly due to the fact that Kemba Walker creates an atmosphere where people like to play.
Richard, where are you on this?
Well, look, this is a much bigger story. I think you look at what happened with Isaiah Thomas, and you go back to how he exited Boston, right?
Richard Jefferson, let's be very honest. You have a history with Kyrie going back to the Cleveland Cavaliers. A lot of the teammates back then during that time period did not particularly care for Kyrie because he was a dissenter from the LeBron James cult. And as it has turned out, Kyrie also seems to have some issues psychologically when it comes to the team framework, things of that nature that I just think are personality issues. Richard Jefferson, he has to walk a tightrope right now because he is one of the broadcasters for the Brooklyn Nets. So he has to make sure that he does not say anything too inflammatory about Kyrie.
One with the injury, then Kyrie comes in. Obviously, there were some circumstances there. Kyrie had an injury late in his first year. His father passed away at the beginning of his last year there. So look, there's always going to be a lot of things, and it's always about the head of the snake. When Kyrie was in Boston, he was the head of the snake. It wasn't about, oh, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were only in their second year and in their third year, and they were still growing and getting better and learning how teams were going to adjust to them. It was about Kyrie. It wasn't about Gordon Hayward and his injury, and if they inserted him too quickly. It was about Kyrie. So Kyrie understands this. You know, many of the years that he played with Braun, he understands that the head of the snake is always going to get the attention. Should he get all of the positive? Some of it. Should he get all of the negative? Some of it. So I'm not going to sit here and just say Kyrie and KEMBA, this is it. This is the number one thing. Yes, KEMBA is playing great. This team is playing great.
It's also a long season. So the Celtics, they could start to slide. I just don't see that because I see the synergy that they play on the court with. I also see that their head coach, Brad Stevens, seems to be more galvanized with the understanding that he has a point guard that actually is not going to waste time acting as if he's smarter than him all the time, which is something that Kyrie tends to do.
We're also talking about Jason Tatum and how he's elevated his game and how he's grown with KEMBA, with Jaylen Brown. So I don't want to just give all the credit of their success to KEMBA. A lot of it has to do with their own growth.
I don't know, Richard, I don't understand this because when you saw the Celtics with and without Kyrie before KEMBA got there, before you know, when Kyrie was still on the team, but he was hurt and not playing how the team performed, you clearly saw a unit that was happier and functioning better without Kyrie. Then you bring in, like, how many different variables do you need to see?
Look, I'm not going to give people a
Max is still mad that Kyrie came into the First Take studios and basically called him out
of what happened with the Jordan Bulls and all this, and I'm not comparing Kyrie to Jordan, but happiness is not always a part of basketball. It's about winning, and sometimes it's about sacrifice. So we can't just sit here and say that, like, hey, they're happier, and so they're going to ultimately, the goal is to win a championship. Some of the most dysfunctional teams I've ever been on were the most successful. So I'm not going to sit here and just talk about happiness.
Hold on. You're going at a straw man right now. Never mind happiness. I'm going to get you right now. Forget happiness. When Kyrie was playing with the Celtics, they performed less well as a unit than when he wasn't, when they performed better.
No, sir. Actually, what you're doing is utilizing a straw man. Many of the games that Kyrie Irving sat out from last season, or even the season before that, prior to his injury, were when the Celtics were playing the weaker competition in the Eastern Conference. So naturally, they're going to have a better record when he's sitting out because they're playing in Cleveland Cavaliers and whatever the weaker teams were that Brad Stevens thought they had a better chance to win, even if Kyrie sat out. Am I saying that the Celtics had great chemistry on the floor when Kyrie was there? No. But to just try to juxtapose their record with Kyrie as opposed to without Kyrie is disingenuous.
No more Kyrie, now KEMBA, and the team is performing better than ever.
Yes, and Max, I agree with you 100%. My only point on this is sometimes younger players, when they have success, it can be a little difficult for them to dial back their game when they're still trying to grow. And the minute Kyrie steps on that floor, he is the best player. He needs to have the ball in his hands, and you have to adjust to your best player. Now, Kyrie has to do some adjusting also, but when young players are trying to grow and trying to see what they're capable of, sometimes there can be growing pains. So we can't always blame that on just KEMBA or just Kyrie. We can't just blame that on individuals. It's really a collective team.
And not just that, we'll see, because at the end of the day, if the Boston Celtics end up getting bounced out in the second round, then what does it mean?
Agreed. That's why we have to wait. Now, you know what's so funny? Every time you make an evaluation on an NBA team, there's all these fanboys that ramble around and run around. Oh, this didn't age well. That didn't age well. This is game 27 of an 82-game season. Why don't you wait and see how things turn out in the end?
A better year. We got to pay attention to all of that, because in the end, if you end up equating or achieving the same result, then where does happiness come into the equation then? We concede the fact that they're happier now. There is no doubt about that. But when I brought up Gordon Hayward, I talked about how the year started. You can't have a guy, because I like Gordon Hayward a lot. You cannot have a guy that is clearly inhibited physically being inserted into the starting lineup.
They were trying to get their money's worth, Stephen A. Smith, and they were trying to program the younger wings to understand we've paid Gordon all this money. We need to get him back into the flow this season. We understand that you guys had a nice little playoff run last year, but we're paying Gordon Hayward. So he is going to be the starter until you guys' contracts come up.
Starting the year off that way, and then couple that with Kyrie's drama, and think it's going to work out for you.
No, so far you're right, Max, but we have to see if it continues into the playoffs. Kemba is averaging just 1 point per game less than Kyrie, so not much of a drop-off in production, but a huge upgrade in leadership and chemistry. And don't sleep on the Toronto Raptors. They've been quite a...
Toronto's like a nice little team. I was much higher on them earlier in the season. It would not surprise me to see them make a very deep playoff run in the Eastern Conference, especially with their pedigree and their experience from last year. But do I see them getting back to the finals? As of right now, I'm not quite sure. It's really open in the East. Could be Milwaukee, could be Philadelphia, could be Toronto, could be Boston. Miami, if they can make a big trade, who knows, maybe acquire a Drew Holiday, maybe some help with their bigs. They're a couple of players away, Miami is. The East is relatively wide open. The thing about Milwaukee is Milwaukee looks like one of those teams that plays every regular season game like it's a playoff game. And then they get to the playoffs and they have no level to climb up to or get up to. It's going to be very interesting to see if they match up with Philadelphia in the playoffs this year, how things go with that. Because Antetokounmpo is going to have to show that he's a transcendent player, not just a very good or great player, but a transcendent player to get past Philadelphia if Philadelphia is fully healthy. Because they have a lot of big bodies to throw at him, and they're going to be able to replicate that wall that the Toronto Raptors built against him in last year's playoffs. But anyway, peace.